My name is Alyssa, and this is Listen to Liz. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me on another episode of Listen to Liz. Today, let's talk life. Specifically, let's talk everything I've learned since moving to New York and booking in 6 months. All right, so today is going to be our first installation of the Let's Talk Life section of Listen to Liz. Okay, so this is a new topic we're bringing on. We've done Let's Talk Music, Let's Talk Auditions. Today we're starting Let's Talk Life. So this is going to be learning about me and my life, my journey, how I kind of got here, and giving some real life advice. I've got lots of things that I'm super excited for in this topic. Today, we're talking the first 6 months living in New York. So we're going to talk about my process of moving, all the things I've learned, and anything that you should know if you're considering moving to New York specifically for acting. Last week on the pod, we talked about monologues. So if you're looking for a new monologue, trying to update your monologue book, or you're just interested in learning more about what is a back pocket monologue, go check out that video. It's up and live. All right. Now, without any further ado, let's get started. The first thing we're going to be talking about is before you move, because obviously you don't just decide to move to New York and then the next day you're there. That's not quite how it goes. My junior year of college, I was already starting to think about where I was going to end up, and I wasn't super sure where I was going to go. The first thing is to know where you want to move. New York is big. There's lots of places you can live within New York. Are you going to live in Manhattan? Are you going to live in Brooklyn, Queens, Harlem, the Bronx, like XYZ? There are so many places within New York that you could live, and within every borough of New York, there are, positives and negatives to that area. Like, if I live in Manhattan, I'm right where I need to be for auditions and all that kind of stuff, but it's expensive to live in that area of Manhattan. Can you afford to live in that area? All that good stuff. So the first thing I did when I knew that I wanted to move to New York was I started researching different areas that I wanted to live in. And I kind of wound up looking into either living in Astoria or Brooklyn. Now, I hadn't done much research into the different neighborhoods within Brooklyn. I just knew that I liked the idea of living in Brooklyn, but Astoria was really where I was aiming to end up. And I knew this by doing some basic research into the demographics that live in that area, what kind of nightlife there is, what kind of businesses are near there. Is there going to be lots to do in that area? Am I going to have to travel far? Is it walkable? Am I going to need a car? Like all that kind of stuff. Depending on what you're looking for, there's an area in New York for you. You just have to do some research and figure out what specifically it is that you're looking for. So my number one thing is do your research. Know kind of what you're looking for. Also, before you move, network. Who do you know who knows someone in New York? Because I can almost guarantee you that somebody you know knows somebody who lives in New York, or knows somebody who knows somebody who lives in New York. And that person, they might be willing to help you. And they might know a little bit of advice, of wisdom. For me, luckily enough, I already knew a few people that lived in New York. So I was able to ask them and say, what do you think about this area? What's an area I should not be living in? That kind of thing. And I got some advice and I got some feedback and some things that kind of helped me narrow down my decision to where I was in January. I was almost positive I was going to be living in Astoria when I moved post-grad, which leads me into my next advice, which is visit. If you can, you should visit where you're going to move, because turning your whole life upside down to move somewhere and then realizing that you don't like it is really difficult. Now, it's not possible. You can always leave. You always have the option to decide that you don't like it and decide that you didn't make the right choice and you want to leave, and that's perfectly okay. But to save you lots of time and effort and money, you should visit. I was lucky enough to get into the A1 conference last January. So we were in New York for a week. So for a week, I was in Connecticut, taking the train to New York every day, walking around, physically seeing New York. Obviously it's not quite the same thing as living here, but doing some investigation into what my life would actually be like if I lived in New York and seeing whether or not I actually liked it. Did I like having to ride the train everywhere? Did I like walking that much? I grew up in small town Texas. I went to school in small town Oklahoma. Moving from these small town areas into the biggest city ever is quite a jump. Is that something that I actually wanted? And after visiting in January and kind of seeing what I saw, I realized that it was what I wanted. So visit. Because if I had come up and decided I didn't like it, then I would have known and I could have been done, and that's easy peasy. That's before you move. Before you move, do your research, ask around, network, find out who knows somebody in New York, and visit if you can so that you know for sure that you like not only the area that you're thinking about moving, but that you want to move to New York in general, because you may decide that you don't like it, and that's okay. It's not for everybody. Maybe it's not for you. That's all right. Okay. The next thing is moving. Okay. So my advice for moving is to sublease if you can. Subleasing is where you're paying somebody else's rent, basically. Somebody who has signed a full year-long contract and maybe they're going to be gone for a few months, or they've moved somewhere else, but they need to finish out their lease here. So you're subleasing from them. So you're paying that person who's then paying the rent for their apartment. Okay, so I subleased from May to September. I was subleasing in Harlem. I got the sublease through a friend of a friend, just like I said, asking around, who knows somebody in New York. My friend was like, I know somebody in New York who's looking to sublease their place right now. Subleasing was so nice for multiple reasons. One, because I didn't sign a year-long lease for an apartment that I had never seen. I looked at a ton of apartments online, and it's so hard to know what's real, what's a scam, what's the apartment actually going to look like based on these pictures. It's so hard to tell and it's so hard to know. And also, I didn't know anybody there who I could live with. There were so many things that were unknown. Subleasing gave me a way to move to the city and actually explore the different areas that I wanted to live in. And because of that, I realized that I did not want to live in Astoria. Astoria is in Queens. Or if you live in New York, you know that the subway system in Queens is crazy. Okay, it's really hard to get to Queens without a car. If you live in Queens, you should probably have a car, and that's my opinion. But I didn't know that. I would have signed a year-long lease to live in Astoria just because I read some good Reddit reviews about it, and that would have been it. I never would have known that it's so hard to get there by train, that it would have taken me forever to get to where I needed to be for, work and auditions and etc. Because I subleased, I was able to explore the city and find an area that I really liked. I was able to actually go and tour the places I was looking at renting rather than just filling out an ad on Craigslist and just signing the first place that I found. I was also able to find roommates. Really, subleasing is the way to go if you can find a sublease. And there are Facebook groups, there are, Reddit groups, there are tons of people looking to sublease constantly all the time. I still get notifications from the Facebook group that I joined back in January of people. Almost every day I get a new thing of somebody looking to sublease for a few months or for a month. And if that's what you have to do for the first few months that you're there is jump from sublease to sublease, do that. Don't sign something unless you're 100% sure that you are happy with the location, happy with the people you're living with, and that you actually want to live there, because it's a lot harder to leave once you've signed a full year contract rather than I'm subleasing for 3 months. At the end of 3 months, if you don't like it, you can go. Also with subleasing, you can find out what things are important to you and not important to you when looking for somewhere to live. The last place I was subleasing was right by a subway station. That became very important to me. After living there and realizing how nice it is to be able to, if it's 10:30 at night, I don't want to have to walk 15 minutes from the subway to my apartment in the middle of the night. So I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't lived right next to the subway station. My last sublease, my window was facing a brick wall. And that is the reality of lots of apartments you're going to see. I did not like that. The window I have here, it does not face a brick wall. Okay, but I didn't know that until I had done it. Okay, sublease. Also, on planning your move and moving, a job. you're going to need a job. Okay. I was lucky enough to find a job before I came to New York. So when I moved, I already had a part-time job that I did in May and then worked for them, a little bit throughout the summer. And while I did that, I was able to find the full-time job that I work now. A lot of the actors that I've met work jobs like, serving. I've heard lots of people get into catering jobs because they're pretty flexible, working as a nanny or a babysitter. And then I've met a lot of people that do, private lessons in music or dance, etc. So there's lots of opportunities for whatever other things you're interested in to work as your survival jobs while you, do the thing. When you're planning to move, think sublease before you rent. Get to know the areas of NYC that you actually like. This goes into doing your research and visiting. Think about what you like and don't like about your sublease when you're planning to sign a lease. Find your roommates while you sublease and get a job. That's planning your move. Once you've moved, you've done the thing, you've traveled all these miles, you've made it to the big city, you have a job. Now what? Take a minute. That is my first piece of advice, is take a minute. Okay, especially for me, I moved the same weekend that I graduated college. So I went through 2 major life changes all at once and then got here and had it in my mind that I was going to be, at Pearl Studios every day on the floor, just really nose to the pavement that very first month. And that is just not true. It was hard. Summer was hard. I needed time to adjust to my new life, to living post-grad, to living in New York City after living in small town Texas and small town Oklahoma my whole life. It was quite the adjustment. Okay, so take a second, breathe. Don't feel like you have to be doing a million things all at once because it's hard. It's very hard. You need to give yourself grace. Okay, and I was very hard on myself at the beginning. Why am I not doing more? Why am I not trying harder? Because it's hard. Okay, and I needed a second, and you will too. Take that second for yourself. Take a minute to breathe and get accustomed to your environment, okay? Walk around, see what's around you, meet people, go spend the day at the coffee shop in your neighborhood and just see the people that are in your community and all that kind of stuff. Now, with that, I will say go to auditions, especially if you moved like I did. I moved in May, so I was really kind of settling in, June and July. June and July, a lot of actors are not in New York. They're off doing summer stock contracts. Summer is kind of the off season for auditions in New York. So this was actually a perfect time for me to be going and doing my first few auditions because it's not as crowded. There were still a lot of people there and there was still a lot going on, but it wasn't such high stake, overwhelming environment that I had no idea what was going on. And there's 500 people here waiting in line and there's all sorts of stuff going on. So my advice to you is if you can go in the summer, go a few times. I think I went to 3 or 4 auditions in June and July. And with that, I was able to go and figure out the audition process and ask people. Just ask, okay? Because it was everybody's first audition at one point. Everybody gets how scary it is and that it's so confusing, especially as a non-union actor where there's all these unspoken rules and things you're not supposed to do and all this whatever. Ask somebody. Go during the summer where it's a little more relaxed and ask, because now that we're getting into, true audition season, I don't feel so overwhelmed because while it is an overwhelming process, I understand the basis of what's going on. So I'm not thinking about that. All I'm thinking about is my audition and wow, there's 500 people here, that kind of thing. Here's some of my other advice that I've learned. Don't take yourself out of the running before somebody else does, okay? Unless you are just absolutely not right for a role, fine. If you don't fit the character, then don't audition. But if you fit the character, don't just assume that you're not right for the part. Don't just not submit because you think, well, I'm not going to get that part, or I don't ever play roles like this, or I don't do a very good whatever. Don't take yourself out of the running before somebody else can, because it is so hard already to get selected. There are so many things that go into casting. It has absolutely nothing to do with you. At the end of the day, everybody's talented. Everybody brings something different to the role. It is just about how you fit into the puzzle. So you might as well put your best foot out there and let somebody else say, you're not right for this role, rather than not even giving yourself the chance to be seen. And maybe they think you're not right for this role, but my friend so and so is doing this thing and you would be perfect for that. You never would have even known that that project even existed if you hadn't submitted for this one. It's all about getting your name out there, letting people get to know you, and getting known in the community. So, with that, submit for a lot, okay? Don't be shy. Submit for a lot of things. I just got an email 2 days ago from something that I submitted, I think back in June. I hardly remember submitting for it anymore. It was a big casting call for a lot of cabarets that this one production company was doing. I submitted. I haven't heard back from them for literally months. And I just got an email yesterday. You never know what's going on, what the process is. Submit for a lot. My next piece of advice is to stay prepared so you don't have to get prepared. Okay, this goes into what we've been talking about with your audition book, your back pocket monologues, practicing your music. All of these things should be happening constantly so that when you do get an audition or you do get a callback and they say, we need 32 bars of this song, you don't have to panic and think, oh my gosh, I have to learn 32 bars of a comedic musical theater piece. You already know 32 bars of a comedic musical theater piece. You don't have to stress about rehearsing it. You show up, you do material that you already know, and you feel confident with it. And that is staying prepared so you don't have to get prepared. Alyssa, where do I find all these auditions? Let me tell you, okay? The places that I find my auditions are Backstage. I have a subscription to Backstage. I use it to submit for lots of different things, lots of film and commercial work. But that's also where I find auditions that are happening at Pearl Studios for different seasons or different regional theaters. Actors Access is a big one. Actors Access does a lot of film and TV as well as theater auditions. Also, Playbill has some good auditions on there. Instagram, I'll just be scrolling through the search page on Instagram, and regional theaters will post their season auditions there. And so over the years, I've followed a lot of regional theaters for their direct season submissions. So sometimes they'll do they'll go to New York and they'll go to Pearl Studios and they'll be like, we're auditioning for our full season here today. But sometimes you can directly submit for them through their website. It'll say like auditions, they're doing virtual submissions, whatever. Instagram is actually a more helpful tool than I thought it was. So, you have to search, but once you do that searching, Instagram helps, populate those things for you. And then another resource that I have found this summer is called The Hustle, NYC, or NYC The Hustle. Either way, I'll put their information in the description. They're on Instagram. They also have a website where they have a calendar. You can subscribe. I think it's like $3 a month. You can subscribe to their calendar, and in the calendar, it'll tell you everything that's happening at Pearl Studios, Ripley Career, all the auditions that are going on that week. So you can always know what is going on and stay prepared. Instead of piecing together these auditions for yourself, The Hustle has got it there for you, okay? Not sponsored. I just love what they do. So definitely go check out The Hustle. And also on their Instagram, they do live updates of what's going on in the audition. So you can open up your phone and go to their story and see, if I go to the Hadestown open call, if I'm at the Hadestown, ECC, and I'm number 65 on the non-union list, and they release us all till after lunch, I don't have to be constantly stressing like, oh my goodness, is my number coming up? I don't have to keep going back into the hall and say, excuse me, like, what number are we on? Like, asking all this stuff. I can open up Instagram and look at The Hustle's story, and it'll say they've called 45 out of 80 union people. They will start seeing non-union after lunch. And I'm like, great. So I'm still good. I can still keep doing my thing. So definitely check out that resource. It is a great one for you. All right. So that is on auditioning. On auditioning, we have check out the summer season. Go in when it's not so busy. Don't take yourself out of the role before somebody else does. Submit for a lot. Don't be shy. Stay prepared so you don't have to get prepared. And use your resources. There are so many resources at your disposal online. Make sure you're taking advantage of them. I hope that this was helpful. I hope that you learned a little something from this, maybe give you some insight on how I got here, maybe how you can get here. If you have any questions, please comment them below. If you have any suggestions, music we should listen to, art we should take a look at, plays we should read, leave it in the comments, and maybe your art suggestion could be featured on an episode of Listen to Lists. All right, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next week.